The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, celebrating KPTS's nearly 50 years of community support in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
This is the program where you make it happen. When you are a guest on this show, it means you have an interesting story to tell and a life worth noting. This week, we welcome one of the aviation world's chief promoters who has helped fuel the engines of the air capital. The name, Al Higdon. The game, aviation, public relations, and advertising. Notably, Higdon gets credit with helping make Wichita-based Learjet a household name. In the 1970s, Higdon's wizardry helped make Learjet the Band-Aid and Jell-O of aviation. That is, people started calling every make and model of business jet a Learjet. But this master of branding actually cut his chops working for another iconic Wichita company, Beech Aircraft. Under the tutelage of aviation legend Olive Ann Beech, Higdon learned what flew and what did not fly when it came to promoting airplanes. Then in 1964, Higdon joined upstart Learjet. He had big ideas and enlisted the help of Hollywood to turn Lear into the iconic brand it is today. But that's only part of the Al Higdon story. He later branched out and lent his Midas touch to help brands in other industries soar to new heights. His PR company, Sullivan Higdon Sink, boasts a client list that includes Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Sonic, and Lowe's. Al Higdon's story is all about great ideas, and he's here to share some more ideas with us and his secrets for success as we go one-on-one right now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'm so happy to have marketing and PR icon Al Higdon on the show this week.
Hi, Victor.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
I've heard so much about you.
Well, I've been around a while.
And you notice I said icon. So, Mr. Icon, Mr. Higdon, take us back to the get-go. Your growing up days, where did you come from? You're not originally from Kansas?
That's correct. Almost. I'm a native of Kansas City, Missouri. Came down here during my high school years. So I've been around since the early 1950s in Wichita. With one exception, I worked in St. Louis right after college for a while. But I met and married my high school sweetheart in 1958. So this past August, we celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary. We have 3 great kids, none of whom live in our state, unfortunately, or grandkids. But I've been retired now for a little over 20 years, doing some volunteer projects and programs, and life is good. I'm enjoying things.
Well, you look good, and you sound like you're doing a good job retiring.
Oh, I'm working at it.
Unlike some people, you know. So as a kid, were you a slick salesman?
No.
Describe that person.
I was a typical middle-class kid who loved sports. We'd move from baseball to basketball to football as the seasons turned, and that was my main focus at that point. I did like writing, though. I enjoyed writing. In high school, I was editor of the school newspaper. Thought I would like to be a sports writer. I found out what sports writers were making at that time and switched emphasis to the business school. But in my senior year at the University of Kansas, I heard about this field, relatively new at the time, called public relations, where you could marry some business background with writing skills and maybe earn a living. So I took some courses in the journalism school at KU and finished there and gave myself 3 days in St. Louis to find a job. There wasn't almost any PR being done in Wichita or even Kansas City at that time. St. Louis was the nearest place. I was able to do that. I worked in St. Louis for a year, decided I needed more writing experience and background. So I came back with my wife at that time. We had just been married to Wichita. I got a second degree in journalism from then Wichita University, and got a job at Beech Aircraft in 1961, which sort of started me on this journey.
But did you study advertising at all? Marketing?
I took advertising, copywriting classes, things like that at KU, but that was not my area of emphasis at that point. Then I took some more classes at Wichita State in their journalism program.
Right.
But mainly I was a PR guy for the first 12 years of my career. First at Beech for 4 years, and then at Learjet for not quite 8 years. And then when I co-founded with my good friend and partner Wendell Sullivan our advertising and PR firm in 1971, we were so small, we were generalists. Everybody did everything.
Right,
You wrote
right.
copy, you bought media, you worked with the printers, that sort of thing. So I sort of evolved into being something in advertising as well.
Then you took on this specialty in advertising, business jet advertising and marketing.
My first 12 years in PR were in the aviation industry. The last 8 from 1964 to 1971, I was with Learjet, first as manager of information services and then as director of public relations. And that was a wonderful time to have been in the aviation industry. It was the emergence of the jets in the business marketplace. They were replacing the propeller-driven airships at that point. And so we were sort of in on the ground floor, breaking ground of how do you market a business jet as opposed to a smaller type of airplane. And so I learned a lot. I'm sure I made a number of mistakes, but that sort of gave me a springboard as an advertising PR agency guy to go out and look for and accept business in that industry. So we did quite a bit of that. Our company worked for probably a dozen or more aviation-related companies while I was there.
So were you the #1 firm in the world, in the country?
Well, it's how you quantify it. In terms of business aviation, like are made here in Wichita, yeah, we were in the country, probably in the world too, but it's a fairly small universe. We were a small agency, compared to others around the country and the world, but with this emphasis that we had, not exclusively, but we did a lot of work in aviation. So we probably represented more clients in aviation than anybody else did.
So you worked for Learjet and Beech Aircraft. Why one for the other?
Well, my first job was with Beech,
Right.
and there I had a boss and a mentor named Jim Greenwood, who my 3rd year at Beech, he was enticed by Bill Lear, who had just come to Wichita in 1963 to establish his company here. And he recruited Jim Greenwood, my boss, away from Beech to his company. And within a few months, Jim came after me and said, I could use some help. Here's what we're trying to do. And that was specifically try to make, and this was Bill Lear's mandate, make the name Learjet synonymous with the term business jet.
Right.
So when people thought of a business jet, they were going to think about the Learjet.
And that name, Learjet, was applied to almost any jet.
It was.
Because of your work.
Well, I think so. We worked very hard in getting Learjets in movies, on television shows, in other people's print advertising, so that when you saw a small jet, it was most likely a Learjet.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also, took a giant step. You enlisted Hollywood to help you in this process.
Right. Yeah.
How did you do that, and why did you do it?
Well, we did it for the reason of broadening the market awareness of the small jet in general and Learjet in particular. And as I mentioned, it was at a good time in the 60s and early 70s because the world was just waking up to these small jet airplanes were going to be real and around. And so Hollywood producers and directors who were interested in finding niches for their movies that would make them different from others employed small jets in them. And we had a great compatriot on the West Coast, named is Clay Lacey, who's a Wichita native, by the way, who's an icon in the industry, who is very good at working with people, and he ingratiated himself as well to the Hollywood group, and they would use him when they needed an airplane, and so we would foster those relationships.
So how did you get together with Sullivan and Sink in the end to form this huge company, this powerful company?
I don't recognize the company you're describing.
Oh,
Wendell Sullivan and I were workmates at Beach Aircraft. Our desks were literally 3 feet apart for 4 years. Mm-hmm. He was the assistant advertising manager and I was a PR guy. We were soulmates. And we had always talked about going into business together at some point.
Right.
And it took us a while to finally figure out a time when it was good for both of us. So in 1971, that time came. But going back a few years earlier, when I came back to Wichita for my second university degree, Vaughn Sink was a journalism student along with me at that point. So Vaughn and I knew each other at that point. So Wendell and I started the business in July of '71. By the next spring, we needed some help. Vaughn was at another small agency, and I was able to recruit him to join us in 1972, and he was made a full partner in 1979. So,
wow, and that became a very wonderful partnership.
Well, it was. It's great if you're in partnership with some of your best friends and,
right.
and you stay that way through the business career, and that's the way it was with us. Unfortunately, Wendell Sullivan died early in 1990, so he has not been with us since that time, and Vaughn and I carried on from that point on until my retirement in 1996.
So you worked in the jet business, airplane promotion business,
Yes.
for a long time. Do you own a jet?
No. In fact, I'm not a pilot. And people are amazed that I was in the industry for 35 years and not being a pilot. I think the cold, hard facts are when I had an interest in flying, I couldn't afford it to learn. And once I had a little money and I could afford to do it, I was busy enough. I didn't allow myself time to learn to fly. So I regret that, frankly, that I'm not a pilot, but I'm not. And if I was, I'd sure have my own airplane, I think.
So should one have to believe in a product as an advertising, marketing expert? Should one have to believe in a product to be able to market it?
That's my conviction. I think you could find exceptions to that, people who don't necessarily acknowledge that necessity. But I think, Victor, if you are going to truthfully talk about a product's benefits, you have to believe in them yourself. I don't know how you can look yourself shaving in the morning if you didn't. And that was, we never took on a client that we didn't believe in what they were doing or trying to achieve.
So that brings me to my next question. Al, have you had any ethical dilemma in your career?
I think I could say unequivocally no. I never have. I just didn't allow it. I think the closest you get to that is in maybe political advertising. I think that the lines are a little bit smeared there, but we never took on any political clients. Not only for that reason, but also political campaigns tend to, as you probably know, take on a life of their own, and they're busiest when you need to work on some other client activity, and you're doing a disservice to those clients who are paying your bills year in and year out, and we just didn't want to be involved with that kind of a conflict.
So generally speaking, how does deception play a role in marketing today?
Deception?
Yes.
Well, number one, marketing today is different than the marketing that I knew.
Okay.
I've been out of it for 20 years, so I wouldn't presume to be an expert on marketing today. But I would say rather than deception, just a very careful choice of wording is often needed in order to get your point across and still be totally honest and tell the truth.
What's in your mind the difference between marketing and advertising?
Well, marketing is a much broader term. It involves advertising and pricing and promotion and a whole lot of other elements that make up marketing. Research, and so forth, whereas advertising is just one facet of the overall marketing campaign.
So, you know, when I studied a little bit of advertising,
Okay.
and I was taught the big idea. Does that still exist today?
I think so. I think everybody's fighting for that unique part of your product or service that somebody else doesn't have. And often that big idea is what propels you out of the mainstream of discussion. And people are talking about your product or service as opposed to somebody else's.
Right. So how honest and candid could an advertising firm be without, and still be a marketing success without being a failure?
How honest and candid.
Yes. If you had a client that came up to you.
Well, you would have to be honest and candid from the outset. I don't think you could be any other than honest and candid and be a success, a long-term success.
Right.
I think the pathway of failure is lined with one-shot wonders who tell untruths or deceive people unethically, and it may work for a while, but you're found out pretty quickly in your history. So I think to be long-term success, you've got to always tell the truth and be honest.
So let's talk about Kansas a little bit. As an original thinker, a man who loves new ideas, how fresh is the thinking in Kansas these days when it comes to marketing the state?
I think we're getting better. I think for decades we were sort of mired in the fact that we were an entrepreneurial hotbed because we spawned Pizza Hut and Rent-A-Center and a few others like that. But those happened 50, 60 years ago. I think the honesty really started in large measure with the Wichita State Innovation Campus. And I think they are leading economic development in this part of Kansas right now. So I think this whole springboard, as I read about it, I'm not a part of it, of incubating entrepreneurs, matching entrepreneurs with capital, is a very healthy sign for our companies, for our communities' prosperity, I think.
So what should Kansans be doing differently to attract new companies and people who are excited to live in this state?
Boy, these are big questions. And I've wrestled with them a long time. Other than Victor, understanding what our strengths are, I think wisely the city leaders now have decided, because we did this for a long time when I was involved, try to chase that big company, that mega employer and so forth in competition with dozens of other communities. Let's grow our own and be successful at that and pick our niches of expertise and target potential companies that fall within the niches where we can provide labor. I think things like the National Center for Aviation Training at Jabbar Airport are really important because they're training not only aviation people, but healthcare professionals and others. I think the community that provides an ample and well-educated workforce will have a leg up on other communities who maybe can throw money at a project, but don't have the backup locally to sustain the industry.
All right. Tell us, what are the big things you've learned in life that you would like to share with the younger people who would like to follow your footsteps?
It's almost a central theme, but in advertising and public relations, marketing, you've got to tell the truth. This is not unique to those professions, but I think that's the only one I know anything about with any depth. And do not put yourself in a compromising position. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're probably doing the wrong thing, and figure out what it is you really want to do. These are not unique ideas with me, but I do happen to endorse them that I've heard from others.
So what do you think, or what would you say you've done through your professional career to help make the world a better place?
What have I done?
Yes. Or your firm, for that matter.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm very proud of is the firm that I helped start almost 50 years ago now employs well over 150 people in Wichita and Kansas City. They're good paying jobs, excellent retirement packages for the people. And I'm proud to have been a part of providing good livings and good retirements for very qualified and good people. I'm happy about that. I'm happy for any small amount that I've contributed to cultural refinements in this community, social service organizations that I've been a part of helping out a little bit. So those are, I think, tangible things that you can look back on and say, well, okay, think that worked out pretty well.
I think those are wonderful contributions.
Thank you.
Define Al Higdon for us. Who is he?
Well, you have very good questions.
Oh, thank you.
I guess I would describe him as a guy who kind of early on targeted what he thought he might like to do in life, went out and found a way to do it. At that point, did the very best he could for several decades in achieving some degree of knowledge and experience in that area, and then left not only his company, but hopefully the community in which he lives somewhat better because he was there.
So targeting early in life is key to success?
Well, it was for me. And I talk to university people. I mean, parents bring their children or grandkids to me and say, talk to this person. They don't know what they want to do. So I think it hits various people at different parts of their life and their career, what it is they really want to do. As I say, early on, I knew I wanted to write. I liked business. And that was a marrying with advertising and PR that worked for me. Right. Maybe that was lucky, maybe it was happenstance, I don't know. Others, I think, probably they will struggle through several jobs before they really figure out what it is they want to do. I can't speak to that experience because it wasn't mine.
Right. So you've worked about close to 10 years in the aviation business.
Well, 35 years in aviation.
Oh, 35,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, about 12 on the client side as a direct employee, and then about another 25 years with the agency where we worked with aviation clients. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all of those years of employment, and you've been retired, you said 20?
21 years, yeah.
What have you defined as your philosophy?
I would say learn from smart people. We always tried to hire people smarter than we were. I'm always sitting at the feet of the people I respect so much, Russ Myers, the Jack DeBoers, others of that group, and learn from them, respect their knowledge and expertise, and don't try to do it all yourself. A one-man band doesn't last very long.
What's the greatest mistake you've made in your life or in your career?
Maybe not learning.
If any.
Maybe not learning to fly. I regret that. I regret that. I think I would have been better at my job had I been a pilot. I wasn't, so I made the best of what I could from there.
So, Al, what would you like to see as your legacy?
Here was a guy who tried to be a good husband, a good dad, granddad, respect people with whom he worked, and he tried to improve the community that gave him opportunities.
Well, I think you've done a wonderful job in this community, and people respect you from all that I've gathered.
Thank you.
And they love you. Tell us about your family, your children. What do they do? Anyone following in your footsteps?
Actually, partially. Our oldest girl, who's now 52, worked in several advertising agencies in Kansas City and Springfield, Missouri, and in North Carolina. She and her husband then co-founded a business about 20 years ago in North Carolina, which they sold a couple of years ago. So she was the only one who followed directly what I was doing. I have a son in Fort Collins, Colorado, who's more of computer technology guy. He works for, as my wife says, an adult beverage company, the New Belgium company, which makes Fat Tire beer.
Okay.
And he handles all of their computer work. It's a highly automated brewery. And our youngest is a daughter, and she's in Kansas City. She's our fashionista, and she works in the fashion industry. So we have five grandchildren and now 4 great-grandchildren. So
congratulations.
That's our family. Thanks.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Final question.
Yes.
We are now in the world of digital, advertising, communications, the whole shebang. If you were still working in your career, not retired, where would you fit into this?
Let me back up and say your question prompts the answer. That's exactly why I got out of advertising when I did. I had determined in my late 40s that by the time I was 60, I wanted to be doing something else. And that happened in 1996. I saw the digital age coming. I knew I probably was going to be ill-equipped to keep up with it, let alone stay on top of it. Victor, if I were looking for a job right now, I would probably be unemployable. I mean, advertising as I knew it is so basic to what these young people are doing now. It's amazing, and I applaud them for what they're doing. But that's not my world.
But you've laid the foundation.
That was done.
Yes, and you did that very well.
That was done. We established the culture, if you will, of the organization. My company is now in the 3rd generation of leadership.
Right.
Everybody that we turned the business over to is now retired. And so the young people now, plus or minus 50 years old, are running the business now.
So now you've been retired for 20 years. What
Yes.
do you enjoy most in your retirement?
I think having my own calendar is nice.
Very good.
I could go to meetings that probably I want to go to as opposed to where I'm expected to be. I still play racket sports. I still work out. I still do a little volunteering. So life is good. We do a little bit of traveling, but not even too much traveling these days.
On that note, Al Higdon, thank you so much.
It was my pleasure to be with you, Victor. Thank you for asking me.
And it's been a pleasure to have you, and I'll say that you are an icon in the advertising world and a respectable citizen of our community.
Oh, you're very kind to say that. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of One on One. If you have a question or comment, send it off to oneonone@kpts.org. What you think matters to us. I'm Victor Hogstrom. We hope to see you back here next time when the stars align for another great conversation. So long.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, supporting KPTS and the communities it serves in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Support also comes from viewers like you. Thank you. Call KPTS to receive a DVD copy of this program for a $40 donation. You can also send a check or money order along with the program name, date, and time to the address on your screen. And you will receive a 1-year KPTS membership.